This screencast supports this lesson on expressions with get. It's from Language to Go Intermediate by A. Clare and J.J. Wilson, published by Longman. So the topic of the lesson is weddings, and the unit introduces the vocabulary on the topic in exercise 1. So here's the task. It says look at the words about weddings and explain the difference between the pairs of words. So you could either do that, or you could show some pictures and get the students to label the pictures. So that's quite a nice way to lead into the topic. You could get them to do some discussion briefly if you like. I'm not keen on exercise 2 about how did your parents meet, etc. Just for various reasons. I think it's better to not do that task. But feel free to ask them if they've ever been to a wedding, what was it like, if they're married, etc. Next, there's a reading task in exercise 3. It says Carla and Greg, in the picture above, had a very unusual wedding. These things were all connected to it in some way. A radio station, a competition, the press. What do you think the connection is? So the students make some predictions, try and guess what they think these 3 things have to do with Carla and Greg's wedding. And then you need to tell them that you're going to put them into 2 groups, Group A and Group B, and that they're both going to read a text. So Group A are going to read this text and answer these 3 questions about it. And Group B are going to read a different text, this one, and answer these 3 questions about it. The texts aren't very long and complicated, so it shouldn't take them too long to do it. So in 2 groups, the students read the text, answer the questions, and in their same groups compare their answers to make sure they're the same. Once that's done, you need to bring everybody back together and they're going to exchange the information they've got about their text to the other groups. A nice way to do this would be to now give Group A the 3 questions that Group B answered when they were reading, and say to the students, all of the students who are in first Group A, you need to find the answers to these 3 questions. So Group A students can now ask Group B students these questions, and Group B can give them the answers. Similarly then, Group B can be given the questions that Group A answered for their reading task, and they ask the students in Group A for the answers to the questions. The language focus is next, and this focuses on vocabulary not from the reading text, but on the topic of marriage, and some of the vocabulary relates directly to Carla and Greg's wedding. So there are 9 sentences and they all contain a different expression with get, a very much used word in the English language and one that students do struggle with. And they simply need to match the expressions with one of the definitions on the right. So do the first one together. Tell them to just write the letter, the corresponding letter, next to the sentence on the left, and then allow them to either do it alone and check together or put them into small groups so that they can work together and match the expressions with the definitions. This obviously provokes more discussion around the language, so is preferable. Either way, make sure the students have checked with other students before you do feedback and make sure the students can see the answers. During feedback to this task, you'll need to probably concept check a few of the expressions that the students have struggled with or are not 100% clear on. You can then move on to focus on form. So in the book they choose to categorise the different expressions into 3 groups. Get plus adjective, like get married. Get as a fixed expression, so get to know someone. And then get as a phrasal verb, so that would be get used with another particle. So for example, to get over someone. So get plus the preposition over. So you could elicit the first 3 from the students to make sure that they're on track and they understand the task, and then put them into groups and ask them to categorise the other expressions that they've looked at in the earlier task. Then do some drilling to focus on pronunciation. Drill some of the sentences from exercise 5, but of course not showing them the sentences as you drill. Think about features of phonology that are useful for the students to know. So for example, they didn't get to know each other first. They didn't get to know. Weak t there with the schwa sound. Okay. Also, where's the stress? Okay, so just choose a few of those sentences and drill them, focusing on sentence stress, weak sounds, any linking, any contracted forms, etc. Next, they can do some practice. So exercise 7 is perfectly fine. It's sentences with gaps. They need to select an expression with get, and they need to make sure that they are using the correct form of the verb in the sentence. So for example, Amanda and Mick last summer, they need to make sure that get is in the past. So do check that while you're setting up the task, and do number 1 together, making sure that they're all sure about what they need to do. Again, students can work together on this, or they can do it individually and peer check to build confidence and check their answers. Get some feedback, and then we can move on to the freer practice. The book suggests a discussion task in number 8 and a writing task in number 9. We're not going to do the writing task, and again, I'm not so keen on the questions that they're setting in number 8. They're not really appropriate, talking about divorce and arranged marriages. We don't want to go into those quite sensitive topics for some, and also they don't provide practice of the target language. Often in course books they focus on the topic for the freer practice and not the target language. What we want them to do is to practice these expressions with get. So for the freer practice, I'd suggest coming back to these expressions from exercise 5 and creating some questions that the students can ask. So for example, you could say, is it a good idea to get married or just live together? Get to know. How long does it take you to get to know your best friend? Is there anything that really gets on your nerves? Etc, etc. So try and think of some questions that the students can ask each other and tell them that they've got to answer using the expressions. Okay, so they're getting some nice practice. Don't feel you have to use them all. If you want to miss out, get divorced, that's fine. But try and include as many as possible. And as I say, if you don't want to make it personal, which is probably a good idea, you could just start the question with, is it a good idea? For example, is it a good idea to get back together with an ex? Why not? Monitor this and make some notes on good examples and incorrect examples of the expressions with get. And when you've got everybody back together, get some feedback on ideas. What did they find out about each other? What did they have any ideas in common with each other? and then do some post-fluency correction.